Welcome to the InCUBE training presentation on methodologies and findings for social inclusion and gender mainstreaming in the construction industry. This training is broken into two educational portions. First, we want to improve your understanding of social inclusion, especially in the context of deep energy renovation. We will also go over the key recommendations on social inclusion that we developed within the InCUBE project. Second, we would like to present the results from the research undertaking in gender mainstreaming. In this area, we developed a gender impact matrix and carried out two investigations. The survey and Q&A part of the live recording have been omitted from this training video for brevity. Starting with a basic overview, social inclusion is about improving people's ability, dignity, and opportunities to participate in society, especially for those who are disadvantaged. Within the InCUBE project, our focus is on making the renovation process itself inclusive. This means considering everyone affected by renovation activities, including residents, construction workers, project stakeholders, and others involved in the project. One useful way to look at social inclusion in deep energy renovation is through the concept of energy justice. Energy justice has three key principles: distributive justice, recognition justice, and procedural justice. Let's look at each of these in more detail. Distributive justice focuses on fairness in outcomes. It looks at how the benefits and burdens of renovation are shared. Deep energy renovation can bring several benefits, such as lower energy bills, improved comfort, and better building performance. However, it can also create challenges, like increased costs or disruptions to daily life for those affected. The key question is, who benefits and who bears the cost of renovation? There are three key aspects to consider. There should be a fair distribution of costs and benefits. Projects should make sure that investments and energy savings benefit all residents. This can be achieved through measures like targeted subsidies or financial support, so that even low-income households are not excluded from renovation. We also need to think about social protection for residents. This means having safeguards in place to prevent risks, such as excessive rent increases or other challenges linked to renovation. Sometimes tenants are forced to move out because renovations can eventually raise rents. Policies that protect against this, or that ensure rental neutrality, are important. We also need to make sure that energy savings are greater than any rent increases to help reduce risks for residents. Another key point is ensuring equitable outcomes. Projects should contribute to broader social goals, like reducing energy poverty or improving comfort and health conditions for residents. The second principle is procedural justice. This is about the decision-making process itself. We need to ask whether people affected by renovation are meaningfully involved in decisions, and whether governance processes are transparent throughout. There are three main aspects here. First, we need to ensure inclusive participation. All actors, especially residents, should be involved at every stage of renovation planning. This means engaging them early, starting from the design phases and continuing through all stages. Residents should have the chance to influence key renovation decisions, priorities, the implementation plan, and the types of technology being used. We can do this by co-designing measures with residents and building their capabilities. For example, we can provide training on how to use new technologies and systems. Second, transparency is crucial throughout the entire process. We need to ensure clear communication about costs, benefits, timelines, and possible disruptions. This helps residents understand what is happening and builds trust in the project. The third aspect is collaborative governance. Since these projects involve many actors, it is important to maintain continuous and open dialogue between all groups. This helps ensure that decisions reflect diverse perspectives throughout the process. Moving on to the third dimension, recognition justice. This means acknowledging that different groups experience renovation processes differently. People have different starting conditions, capabilities, and constraints. The key elements here start with recognizing and identifying who the vulnerable groups are. These can include energy-poor households, elderly residents, tenants at risk of displacement, or those with limited access to information or digital tools. It is also important to understand their practices and lived experiences. Different residents have different comfort needs, energy habits, and levels of familiarity with technology. Ignoring these differences can create a gap between the technological solution and actual user behavior. Finally, integrating local knowledge and experiences from previous or similar interventions in the area helps ensure that solutions are better adapted to the local reality. When we look at these three key principles of energy justice, recognition justice, procedural justice, and distributive justice, they help us identify where social impacts and challenges may appear within such projects. We approach this by developing a social inclusion framework. This framework consists of 6 key dimensions, which align with the justice principles mentioned earlier. These dimensions include end-user engagement, accessibility, affordability, stakeholder engagement, health and safety, and equal employment opportunities and conditions. For each of these dimensions, we identified specific impact areas based on the scope of InCUBE activities. These areas represent the types of changes we want to see across these dimensions once the renovation phase is complete. For example, with end-user engagement, we aim to increase resident participation and collaboration throughout the process. We also want to minimize disruption and raise awareness about the new systems being implemented. For stakeholder engagement, we want to strengthen collaboration between different actors. For health and safety, we aim to improve health and safety conditions on the demo site for everyone present. These impact areas apply to the target groups identified in the project. We have 4 key target groups: end users, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, and construction workers. Each of these impact areas applies to these target groups. One important feature of this framework is that it is quite transversal in nature. These 6 dimensions remain relevant across different renovation interventions and across the different demo sites within InCUBE. The specific impact areas can be tailored based on the scope of each project or its context. In this way, the framework is transferable and can be applied across different renovation projects. Based on these impact areas, we developed social inclusion recommendations. These are to be implemented by each demo site during the renovation phase, covering each of the 6 dimensions. The recommendations are detailed for each demo site, including concrete actions, timelines, responsible parties, and more. This slide gives a high-level overview of the types of practical tips that were implemented across the InCUBE demo sites. When it comes to end-user engagement, the focus is on establishing clear two-way communication with residents. This includes providing administrative and financial guidance during the renovation process, collecting regular feedback on user satisfaction, and proactively communicating potential disruptions and benefits. The second dimension is accessibility. Here, the idea was to integrate universal design principles during renovation works, making sure the site remains accessible for all users. For example, a lift was installed in a building housing primarily older residents. The third dimension is affordability. The focus here is on ensuring transparent communication about financial arrangements, costs, and benefits of renovation. This helps build trust among residents and all actors involved. The fourth dimension is stakeholder engagement. This involves maintaining continuous communication and coordination between all stakeholders and communicating the progress of renovation and key milestones to both internal and external stakeholders. The fifth dimension is health and safety. This involves ensuring compliance with safety standards and maintaining safe and hygienic conditions for both workers and residents on site. We also have equal employment opportunities and working conditions. This is addressed at the project level, not just at the demo site level. The focus here is on raising awareness and promoting inclusive practices within the sector. That was a general overview of the recommendations implemented at the demo sites. Now, let's move on to what we have been doing within InCUBE regarding gender mainstreaming. We started by developing a gender impact matrix framework. This framework includes 8 key dimensions that represent the different gender barriers that can occur within the sector. These dimensions include access to educational opportunities, access to the job market, access to training opportunities, the nature of work, workplace conditions such as on-site safety, work-life balance, workplace environment, and the pay gap. The analysis was conducted in 2 stages, which we call investigations. In the first investigation, we tried to understand whether gender challenges still exist in the sector across these dimensions. We analysed challenges at 3 professional levels: macro, meso, and micro. In the second investigation, we tried to understand whether the innovative InCUBE technologies, as shown here, can help address these challenges and make the sector more inclusive for women. We would now like to present the results of the first and second investigations. We begin with the first investigation, where we aim to understand the perception of gender-related challenges in the construction and renovation sector. In total, around 69 people from the consortium responded to this survey. When we look at gender composition, we see about 62% male and 38% female participants. Regarding professional levels, most responses came from the meso level, making up 49%. The meso level represents organizations that are directly engaged in renovation activities on the ground, such as construction companies, technology providers, and architectural firms. The second largest group is the macro level, with about 29%. This group mainly includes public authorities and research institutions. The third group is the micro level, representing about 22%. These are professionals involved in on-site work, mainly construction workers. Let's look at the results. This is the impact matrix for the first investigation. We can see that about 94% of participants agreed there are barriers for women when it comes to accessing technical or managerial positions. This was the most reported challenge. Other challenges included access to educational opportunities, on-site safety, and access to training opportunities. These were noted by both male and female respondents. One clear result from the impact matrix is that structural, organizational, and cultural barriers still exist in the sector, affecting both genders. However, women reported significantly higher exposure to barriers than men across all dimensions. There are also similarities. Aside from the top challenges, work-life balance was frequently mentioned. In the open-ended replies, many comments from both male and female respondents pointed to low work-life balance in the sector. The main differences that emerged were related to pay gap and workplace environment. Here, we can see a clear difference when looking at the data from a gender perspective. More female respondents agree that there is a gender bias in salary setting across roles in the sector. Additionally, more women reported that they have personally encountered or observed incidents of workplace discrimination or hostility. We also conducted the investigation by professional level, as mentioned earlier. The results were quite consistent, especially at the macro and meso levels, which showed similar patterns. The only key difference appeared at the micro level. For roles on the construction site, the reported challenges were quite low across all dimensions. However, it is important to note that all respondents at the micro level were male construction workers. This means we do not have the perspective of women for these site-based roles. This points to a perceptual gap and reflects the continued underrepresentation of women in site roles, rather than an absence of challenges at this professional level. To complement and validate these findings, we also conducted a survey with external participants from Tech4EU construction projects, including Beyonders, Robot Army, and Human Tech. In this survey, we had a slightly larger sample size. Around 87 people responded, of whom 76% were women. We encouraged more female workers to participate in order to gain more detailed insights into their experiences in the sector. The data collected was also quite geographically diverse. We have responses from all over Europe, including countries like Spain, Italy, and France. When we look at the key challenges reported by these external participants, the main issues are related to organizational and cultural factors. The most frequently reported challenge is the absence of mentorship or role models in the field. Another major challenge is gender bias in hiring, promotion, or career advancement. These two challenges were reported at the same level. There is also a challenge related to lack of work-life balance within the sector. Another important issue is the lack of awareness about career prospects in the sector. These challenges highlight the importance of representation, guidance, and fair career progression within the sector. When we look at the results by gender, it becomes clear that women consistently report significantly higher levels of barriers across all categories. For female respondents, one of the key challenges is gender bias in hiring, promotion, or career advancement. This is followed by a lack of awareness about career prospects and low work-life balance. Another important challenge for women relates to more structural barriers, such as unequal pay or limited access to leadership roles. For male respondents, the top barriers are the absence of mentorship or role models, lack of work-life balance in the sector, and unequal pay and gender bias in hiring or promotion. In general, the challenges faced by female respondents are linked to systemic inequalities and organizational barriers. Across the open-ended responses, we noticed that many female respondents described in detail the kind and nature of challenges they have been facing in the sector. Here you can see some examples. These insights give us a clearer picture of how these challenges show up in the everyday professional environment for women. Several women, for example, described situations where their competence or authority was questioned, especially when they held leadership or technical roles. Some also mentioned facing toxic workplace behavior or harassment, particularly when visiting construction sites. There were also women who talked about biases they experienced during the hiring process. For example, they were directly asked about their plans to have children. Many responses fell into these categories, mainly focusing on cultural stereotypes and organizational barriers. This shows how workplace culture and gender stereotypes continue to shape professional experiences in the sector, especially for women. Now, looking at the second investigation, we have the impact matrix, which shows how InCUBE technologies contribute across different dimensions to promote gender equality in the sector. To highlight the key points, technologies related to real-time safety monitoring systems, such as PPE monitoring, drone-enabled surveying and modeling, prefabricated construction technologies, and BIM-connected robotic systems, were identified as the most influential. There are three main reasons why these technologies can improve inclusion in the sector. First, they are changing the nature of work. Many tasks that used to be manual or physically demanding can now be done with the help of assisted technology, automation, or digital support. This reduces physical strain and exposure to certain risks. Second, these technologies can change where tasks are performed. Some of them help move work from on-site environments to off-site or manufacturing locations. These settings are usually more controlled, safer, and more predictable, which improves working conditions for everyone. The third point is that we are opening up access to new job and training opportunities. This allows us to introduce more digital, technical, or coordination-based roles, which rely less on physical strength and more on skills like operational or analytical thinking. This can be an attractive option, especially for young people or women. Over time, it can also help change the image of the sector, making it more appealing. However, there are key conclusions to keep in mind. We need to be careful when interpreting the contribution of these technologies across different areas of the sector. These technologies are enabling tools, not transformative solutions on their own. Technology alone cannot create inclusion. Without organizational change, new technologies can simply reproduce existing inequalities. The impact of these technologies depends on how they are implemented, including access to training, allocation of roles, and career progression. It is important to pay attention to the distributional effects of these technologies. The way they are governed and implemented will determine whether they open up inclusive pathways. We hope you found this training on social inclusion and gender mainstreaming informative. For more information and updates from InCUBE, visit www.incubeproject.eu.